However, during the subsequent trial of the case, the fellow villager's performance disappointed him greatly. The Zhengang County Court handled Yang Xinhai's theft and attempted rape case quite quickly, because the facts of the case were clear and the evidence was conclusive, leaving no room for doubt. On December 19, 1995, the People's Court of Zhengang County sentenced Yang Xinhai to 5 years in prison for theft and attempted rape. Unfortunately, the warmth and hospitality of the simple-minded Central Plains farmers failed to soften Yang Xinhai's cold heart after having his fill. Yang Xinhai didn't even say a word of thanks and just slung his bedding roll over his back and left. He didn't go home, but was looking for an opportunity and a target to commit a crime. Yang Xinhai was good at walking at night an hour after dinner. He walked more than 20 miles, farther than he had walked the whole afternoon. After the judgment was issued, Yang Xinhai met his fellow villager, who was the chief judge at the court. He pleaded with the fellow villager not to send him to the labor reform factory and to find a way to keep him in the detention center to serve his sentence. He said he was afraid of suffering in the labor reform factory. The fellow villager told him that generally, 3 conditions had to be met to serve the sentence in the detention center. Where should he go? Go home? What would happen if he went home? How could he face the people in his hometown as a released prisoner with the charges of theft and rape on his back? Besides, it would take several days to walk the 200-li journey home. What would he eat on the way? As Yang Xinhai watched the busy people in the fields, he couldn't help but come up with bad ideas, and his steps gradually slowed down at this time. He had started to give himself up. But this time, he was trying to avoid the village where he had dinner, fearing that they might provide clues to the police after he committed a crime. Around 10 o'clock at night, Yang Xinhai came to a village entrance. He quietly observed the situation of the village. Some houses had no courtyard walls, and those with walls were very low. He decided to strike here. But it was too early to act, so he needed to find a place to sleep. He walked slowly towards the village entrance. There was a well house there. First, the sentence term was short, or the remaining term was short second. The crime committed was non-violent in nature third. The offender was old and frail, physically disabled, or suffered from diseases like inflammation, and was unfit for labor reform. You committed a rape crime, which is a violent offense. You were sentenced to more than 5 years, and you're young and strong. You don't meet any of these 3 requirements. According to regulations, you can't serve your sentence in the detention center, the fellow villager said. Yang Xinhai was very dissatisfied with what the fellow villager said he thought it was. Because he hadn't given money to the fellow villager, that the latter didn't help him. Before the Spring Festival, in 1996, Yang Xinhai was sent to Sin Seng Prison in Zhengzhou City for labor reform. At first, he was assigned to break stones in the prison. Yang Xinhai later recalled that he had to break 30 cartloads of stones every day, and the task was very heavy. Yang Xinhai was small in stature and weak in strength, often failing to complete the task, so he received more criticism than praise later. He was switched to making wigs, working more than 10 hours a day until his eyes were dizzy. He would be fined if he made mistakes during that period. He found it really hard to bear and almost thought of ending his life. There were already a few men watching the wheat fields in 2s and 3s, carrying their straw mats and choosing their places to rest by the fields. In such a bustling environment, no one would pay special attention to Yang Xinhai carrying his bedding roll. Yang Xinhai stopped at a village entrance. He found a peasant family having dinner and took out the dry rations issued by the labor reform factory from his bedding roll. He carried his bedding roll out of the prison, and no one came to pick him up. He didn't inform his father to pick him up, thinking that it would be useless for his father to come and would just cost an extra train ticket. By then, his heart had become wild. He was in his 30s, single, with no children, and had no attachments, the warmth of a family, which a labor reform prisoner might long for, had long disappeared from his dreams. The affection of his parents could no longer thaw his cold heart. He said he was from Jumadian and lied that he had gone to the city to work, but had been cheated by his foreman and didn't get a single cent of salary. So he had to walk home and just wanted a drink of water. The hospitable host warmly served him a bowl of delicious white noodles and stuffed the cold steamed buns he took out back into his bedding roll. When you're away from home, you never know what might happen. There's plenty of food at home. Having you for dinner won't make us poor, the host said. When he got closer, he saw that the well house had no door and no one lived in it. Yang Xinhai took a look inside by the moonlight and found it was fairly clean. He went in, unpacked his bedding roll, and fell asleep right away. When he woke up, he saw that the 3-star constellation had moved to the southwest. It was already the second half of the night. Since he could remember, he had only endured humiliation with his parents. His siblings were even more unreliable. He had been sent to labor reform camps 3 times over the years, but none of his 5 siblings had come to see him or given him any financial support. They had all gotten married one after another, but never thought of him or cared about him. Although the weather at the end of May was not too hot, the farmers in the Central Plains were already harvesting wheat. For several days, he was extremely nervous, fearing that the police would trace him through them. Fortunately, the 2 didn't betray him. He was just overly worried. But he learned a lesson from this experience. Too many people in a gang would lead to mistakes. He had to work alone to be safe, and must change his location after each crime to avoid being caught by the police. From then on, he started his career of committing crimes while on the run alone. In October 1995, Yang Xinhai was prosecuted by the People's Procuratorate of Zhengyang County to the People's Court of Zhengyang County for theft and rape. As soon as the case reached the court, Yang Xinhai felt quite confident because he knew there was a fellow villager who worked as the chief judge at the Zhengyang County Court. In Yang Xinhai's view, since they were from the same village, the fellow villagers should give him special treatment. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, he had reached a market more than 50 kilometers away from the crime scene. Yang Xinhai sold the bicycle for 15 yuan, bought a pair of wire gloves and a small flashlight, and got ready for theft from then on. He embarked on the road of professional crime, a road leading to hell. At first, Yang Xinhai gathered a group of people to beg and rob in gangs, but during a group theft, 2 of them were arrested. To leave that hellhole earlier, Yang Xinhai pretended to be an actively reforming prisoner. He gritted his teeth to endure the physical pain and mental torture, working hard, wholeheartedly, to gain the trust of the prison officers and get a commutation of his sentence. Despite his great efforts, he was only commuted 1 year in the 4th year of his imprisonment. To satisfy his narrow material needs, he thought about stealing again. He only walked more than 10 miles the whole afternoon. When it was almost dark, he entered the territory of Change County, Zukang City, which was adjacent to Sinsang City. In the evening, the barks of pigs, sheep, and dogs in the villages spread everywhere, along with the curling smoke from the chimneys, showing the unique and comforting hustle and bustle of a peaceful era. He sat up, wrapped his clothes, tucked them under his arm, threw his bedding roll into the well, and quietly left the well house, sneaking towards the village. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the village was in deep slumber. Only the occasional barking of a dog broke the pre-dawn silence. Yang Xinhai tiptoed into the village and saw a house with only 3 main rooms, no courtyard wall, and a bicycle parked at the door. The door of the main room was open. By the time she woke up and found it was a stranger, it was too late. After Yang Xinhai finished his deed, he jumped on the bicycle and sped out of the village, of course. The woman didn't dare to chase him or call for help during the busy wheat harvesting season. Someone riding a bicycle at night wouldn't attract anyone's attention. Yang Xinhai easily rode the stolen bicycle for dozens of kilometers. Yang Xinhai, carrying his dirty bedding roll, walked south along the Sinsung section of the Beijing-Zhuhai Expressway. His home was more than 100 kilometers away in the south, but he had no money for a ride, so he had to trudge back step by step. As he walked, he thought sadly that he had the care of prison officers in the prison. But now that he was out, no one cared about him. He had become an outcast again. Yang Xinhai hid in the dark and observed for a long time. There was no sign of movement in the house. He was sure that everyone in the house was sound asleep, and that the bicycle might not be locked when he walked over. He found it was indeed the case. Just as he was about to steal the bicycle, he found that there was only a woman sleeping soundly in the house. He boldly walked over and raped the sleeping woman. The woman first thought it was her husband coming back from the fields. He thought that if he had some money to bribe the prison officers, he could have had at least a year, and a half commutation, which left a scar in his heart. Although Yang Xinhai suffered a lot in the labor reform factory, he learned the skill of breaking stones with a hammer, which later laid the foundation for his criminal acts of hitting people with a hammer. On the afternoon of May 31, 1999, Yang Xinhai walked out of Sinsung prison. During his more than 4-year imprisonment, his father had only visited him once, bringing him some fried dough sticks and steamed buns, but never any money. None of his siblings had ever come to see him. This made him feel a great sense of distance from his parents and siblings. In Yang Xinhai's view, his parents were unreliable. They had given birth to him but couldn't afford to send him to school, and even failed to arrange a marriage for him.